Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Adrienne Montgomery. I'm with ERP Cosultant, and thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about Acumatica and the Acumatica Manufacturing Edition specifically, manufacturing production and warehouse automation. I'm pleased to be joined by Jessica Gadboy with Acumatica and Diane Colley over at Savant Software. Jessica is the pre-sales engineer for the Acumatica Manufacturing Edition, and Diane is the chief software architect over at Savant. And just a couple items about the companies. Acumatica, if you're not familiar, is a ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning System, offers adaptable cloud and mobile technology, and it's only sold through a network of worldwide partners that are certified. And for the Acumatica Manufacturing Edition specifically, the partners have gone through rigorous certification. Acumatica ERP includes financials, distribution, manufacturing, project accounting, CRM, and it's really the only one true cloud ERP platform that's designed for the mid-sized customer. And then Savant is a leading provider of supply chain solutions for small, mid-market, enterprise distributors and manufacturers. And they have a scalable, modular solution that's designed to fit every budget. And they are one of the leading ERP integrated solutions available today. And so we're going to be talking about how an order comes into Acumatica, how that order moves through production, and then how Savant will assist in the production of that order. And we just want to thank you once again for joining us. I'm going to hand this right over to Jessica to start it off with the Acumatica Manufacturing Edition. Jessica, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Adrienne. Just give me 1 second to share my screen here and let me know when you can see a manufacturing dashboard, please.
We see it.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining. Just like Adrienne said, we're going to be doing a discussion and really a demonstration around how Acumatica's Manufacturing Edition is seamlessly connected to warehouse management and shop floor data collection through the likes of Savant. I am not going to take you through any slides. I just have really about 25 minutes of a demo that I will take you through. And then Diane from Savant is going to be talking about some of those touch points between Acumatica and between Acumatica and Savant, and where the shop floor data collection and WMS would touch Acumatica's ERP. So I am going to dive right in. I know there's a mixed audience today of folks that are familiar with Acumatica and some that are not. So what I'm going to do is really just spend 1-2 minutes on an overview of the system itself from a navigation standpoint. So Acumatica is a system that you will have access to anywhere that you have access to the internet. I'm logged in from a laptop today, but if you would like to use a mobile device or a tablet, you could certainly access the same exact Acumatica from any one of those devices. We are a role-based system, so that of course means each user accessing the system only has access to the screens, transactions, reports that they need to do their job. So nobody touching anything within the software that they shouldn't be. We also provide things like a universal search to help new users and veteran users navigate through the system. The universal search can be used as an aid to guide you to something like, if I just type in purchase order here, I could find the purchase order transaction screen where I could go ahead and create a new purchase order. I could also find any existing reports related to what I've typed in, or even preferences where I could modify the settings for my purchase orders. But beyond just searching through the menu items, this search also allows us to look at transactions and profiles. So if I, had entered purchase order number 425, I could bring up that PO right here and, maybe quickly answer some questions related to it. We are also very well known for our customer satisfaction and support. So from the likes of having help within Acumatica. We have a very robust knowledge base where you can learn all about, again, whatever it is that you might have typed in, but you can also add to this knowledge base if you would like to, as a manufacturer, perhaps include knowledge base information around how to perform a shop floor assembly. We do also support document management. So if you wanted to ever upload copies of documents, CAD drawings, customer POs to your transactions within the system, then we do allow for that upload and storage of the files throughout. Last thing I'll mention before I dive into the manufacturing is these dashboards here. This one does happen to be a manufacturing dashboard that I'm looking at, but you can have dashboards throughout Acumatica. So, if you're on the AP side and you wanted to keep a listing of bills to be paid and, who our top performing vendors are, then you could create those dashboards to encompass the data that is pertinent to that role. These dashboards are all real time. So from this manufacturing dashboard, I can monitor, my current jobs and their status. I can take a look at different key performance indicators and costs. And I can also keep track of things that, different charts, for example, who are my top manufacturing customers? What are our top manufacturing items that we are performing on? Lots of different ways you can begin to project this data out to the system and keep a real-time view on it from a dashboard standpoint. Now that we know Acumatica from an overview and navigational way, we are going to get into the manufacturing modules. So I'm going to start here in bill of materials, just so we can take a look at how a bill of materials actually gets set up within the system before we go out and generate a transaction using that bill of materials. So within Acumatica, you will see up at the top in my summary section, we have the finished good that we are going to be creating. We do support multiple warehouses or facilities, as well as revision control. So if you needed to store multiple revisions for a manufactured good, and even create engineering change requests and change orders and send those through an approval process to create a new revision, we can support all of that within Acumatica as well. One thing that is a bit unique to Acumatica, some systems do support this in the same way, but you'll find that others require to maintain two different screens, are the fact that we do blend our routings with our materials on our bill of materials. So in some systems, you'll see that the routings are kept separate from the required materials. We put those together to allow less maintenance, but also this allows you to get very granular with how the costs are placed across the production cycle. So what I mean by that, let's talk about the setup of the bill of materials. In the center of my screen, we have all of the different routings or operations that would need to occur in order for this finished good to be created. Along with each one of those routings or operations, you will see that it is tied to a work center. So each one of those operations is occurring at the associated work center, and those work centers can get set up with their own standard costs. So if you'd like to, capture a standard labor cost, overhead costs, you can do that by setting up your bill of materials, and those will act as the planned costs for production. We can backflush within Acumatica. So if you're familiar with that term backflushing, it really just means, if we are assuming 1 hour of labor is going to be required for the setup, we backflush that 1 hour of time and the 1 hour of costs, rather than needing to go in and have somebody create a labor ticket for that 1 hour of time. Now, beyond the routings and the operations, you'll see down at the bottom of the screen, these are the 4 tabs that are related to whichever operation you have highlighted. So when I'm in the setup operation, these are all of the materials that I would need to utilize. We do support units of measure. We support batch processing. So if you wanted to set up batch sizes for your finished goods or your components or ingredients, you can do so. And we do also support a phantom bill of materials structure. If you have sub-assemblies, you could not only support those sub-assemblies, but you could flatten out the bill by using phantoms if needed. Some of these terms, if you're not familiar with those and you have questions, I will provide my contact information after the fact, and I'd be happy to spend some time with you. Beyond just the materials, you can also include steps that need to be projected to the people out on the shop floor. So if there's maybe a video that needs to be referenced, a drawing that needs to be referenced, or even if you just would like to write the steps in there, we can include the steps, and we can also upload files directly to the bill of materials record. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move away from the bill of materials, and I'm going to spend some time going through an actual work order that uses this bill of materials as the basis for production. We support, as an organization, multiple types of manufacturing businesses or methods. So make to stock, make to order, engineer to order, configure to order, job shop, project centric. These are all different types of environments that Acumatica can support. So I could start directly with a sales order or a quote. I could start with a production order, or I could even start with a manufacturing estimate. So if I have some time towards the end of the demo, I'll spend a few minutes talking about our estimating module, which allows you to go out and create custom estimates for manufactured items that have never been created before. In my example today, we will do a make to order. So I'm going to start with a sales order, and I will place a customer on the sales order. I'm not going to go through all of the details of the sales order entry just because of the interest of our discussion today being around manufacturing. We'll save the distribution for another time. And I'm going to enter in my inventory item here. I'm going to use the same one that we just took a look at the bill of materials for. So you should recognize that part number. And I'm also going to enter the quantity for the order here. Now, a couple of things about Acumatica. If you are new to this environment, we can set up different flags on our orders to, let your salespeople know when you're maybe not meeting a gross profit requirement. We can get visibility into things like on-hand inventory. So if you look down at the bottom, I actually do have 14 of these line items available to me right now. But because this is a make-to-order example, I am going to go through and mark this for production and generate a work order to meet the demand for this sales order. Before I do that, though, I would like to just quickly segue to talk about our product configurator. Acumatica does support, or I should say we do have our own product configurator right within the software. So a lot of times product configurators come from a third-party partner. With Acumatica, it is a module that is completely seamless and built into our manufacturing edition. So as I add an item here, which requires configuration, and this one happens to be a custom baseball bat, you'll see that this configure button becomes available to me. And she's talking a lot about configuration. What does she mean there? Well, what the product configurator does is it allows you to take a base item like a baseball bat. We always know we're going to have to cut the wood, shave the wood, but then you can place features and options on top of that base product. So when I launch this configuration entry, I'm taken into the features and options for that item. This is a rules-based configurator, so it can have include and exclude rules. It is also dimensional, so it can support formulas, and it will do a pricing roll-up based on the component parts that are being selected, the options that are being selected, and it can also be based on just the parent plus the options. I'll go through this quickly. We could spend a lot more time on the configurator, but over on the left-hand side, we have all of our features about that good, or the questions, and then we have the options or the answers to that. So in my example, we have an include-exclude rule set up to say, if the baseball bat, if you paint it black, then you won't be able to put black lettering on that bat because you won't be able to use it, or excuse me, see it. So that is one of the rules set up here. So why don't we go with that one? I'll select that we'd like our handle color to be black. I'll also select that the body of the bat is going to be black as well. Keep in mind that this is tied to inventory. So as I'm selecting black paint, we see that 0.3 gallons of paint are required, which we can now send this over to the work order for this bat to say that we need to pull 0.3 gallons of black paint. When I get over to the color of my engraving now, you'll see black is not an option because of that exclude rule that is set up here. So I can pick an engraving color, And finally, it's asking me which wood type would we like to utilize. So once all of the options have been satisfied, you'll see green check marks across the board. We can also include some dimensional aspects to this. So if you wanted to just, enter in maybe the length, you could go ahead and do so. And finally, I will just say that we have finished this configuration, and those details all get attached to the line now. So there's no need to create a separate part number. I don't need to go out and create a different SKU. We see that the BAT is created, and I can now go out and generate a work order for both of these line items if I would like to. In the essence of time today, I'm just going to generate the one. So to do that, I'll drop one of those line items off, and I'm going to go up to my actions, and I'll say create my production order. So here we are taking the sales order that we started with, and we are creating a production order to satisfy the demand for it. So we have our sales order here, 3850, and now we have a production order, 1283, that has been generated. When I open up that production order or the work order, I'm going to see that there is a couple of things that any manufacturer would find valuable. One is the ability to get event history. So I'll have a full audit trail of all the activities that have occurred against the production order. As I'm issuing materials, I can come back in here at any time, labor, etc., to see what has occurred. I will also get a view of my job costs. So here's everything we have planned based on our bill of materials. As we are actually issuing materials and labor, we will start to capture those actual costs. And Diane's going to talk to you about how you can use Savant to do this from a handheld scanning device if you would like to. And you can also grab the variance, or I should say measure the variance along the way as we are maintaining those planned versus actual costs. So you're getting live shop floor information from that totals tab and your event history tab. We can also go out and see what our material availability is like. So how do we ensure that we do have all of the materials on hand to manufacture this order? And there's a couple of ways we can do that in Acumatica. One is through the use of a tool called Critical Materials. The Critical Materials screen looks at one order at a time. So here we are saying, for this one production order, show me any items that we do not have on hand right now that we need to manufacture this. And you can see this screen isn't showing me any items, so that indicates to me that we have everything we need to manufacture this. If I'd like to double check, I'll just select that Show All Items. It will bring up the listing from the bill of materials for this order, and I can double check that we are not short on anything, which means we can go out and issue the issue the orders to the, issue the materials to the manufacturing job. Excuse me, that was a mouthful. One last thing I should mention, of course, if I did not have the materials available, then I could create purchase orders directly from this screen. That's kind of the whole purpose of the screen. Or I could create work orders for sub-assemblies or transfer orders from other locations. Now, beyond the critical materials, which looks at one order at a time, we do also have our full MRP within Acumatica. So the material requirements planning is what allows you to look at all of your supply and demand at once. So it's going to look at any forecasts that are in the system, and those forecasts can be generated within Acumatica or imported into the system. The MRP is also going to look at master production schedules, and that would be like your build schedule. We need to build 100 Keurigs this month, so let's make sure that we are factoring all of the parts that we need into our purchase schedule. So we can include that. And we're also going to look at all existing sales orders and production orders. Beyond just those sources, we're going to take into consideration lead times, mins, maxes, safety stock, and the result is this MRP display screen, which is all of the suggestions that Acumatica is making for purchasing and production. So this would be your schedule to help you with just-in-time inventory. This would be a way to help you keep your inventory lean and again, manage all of the supply and demand in one place. What we are seeing here, let's just take this top line as an example. I know there's a lot of data here, so let's break down how to read this MRP display screen. If you look here, we have over on the right-hand side, the related document is going to be the document that's driving this demand. So we can see that production order number 873 is going to require that you purchase this item. And in order to do that, it has a 2-day lead time on it. So if you wanted to receive it by the 12th, you should have ordered it on an action date of the 10th. So that's how you read the line. Of course, you can see for some of these examples, we'll have a source of manufacturing. So that could be, again, for a sub-assembly. It could be an order that's being suggested out of the master production schedule. So MRP is making all of these suggestions for you, which after doing the due diligence to ensure that is in fact the action you'd like to take, you can select the line items and create your purchase orders or your manufacturing orders, or again, your transfer orders right from this screen. Just like with the visibility we had on the production side from MRP, you can always take a look at your detailed inquiry. So that MRP detail inquiry is going to show you for that item all of the production orders, purchase orders, and plans that are related to that item. So you can see how inventory has been moving in and out of the system through that MRP detail inquiry and what's driving the demand for that detail. Now, we talked about raw material shortage. So we, at this point, know that we do have all of the items we need to actually manufacture the item or the finished good that we're creating today. So why don't I just finish up with the production order that we've been working on by issuing materials out to it. If you look from my production order maintenance screen, I have my whole list of production orders, and the one right at the top, of course, is the one we've been working with today. And from my production order now, I can release out my materials. And there's a few ways that you can do this. Actually, I got to release my order first, which just means we're done planning the order. We are now ready to release it. But as far as the materials, you could backflush them, like I mentioned earlier. You know, if it's bolts and nuts and we don't really care about issuing a transaction for those bolts and nuts, maybe we just backflush them. But you could create a material transaction, which is what I'm going to do here today. I'm doing this material transaction on the back end. Diane is also going to talk a little bit about how with Savant you can do the material transactions through barcode scanners, feed those back to the ERP, and act as the shop floor data collection point of contact back to Acumatica. So Diane will talk to you about that. As I create this material transaction, one thing I'd like to mention is you could be allocating materials from a particular lot or using a particular serial number at this point in time. So if we do have hard allocations with an Acumatica, and you can pull from those lots or serials. I won't modify the quantities. I will just release exactly what is suggested to my order. And as we do that, we have now captured the first actual material transaction to hit that job. So we'll go back and view that in a moment. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about labor. And it will be a very short discussion because labor works just like material transactions do within Acumatica. To capture labor, you would either create labor transactions similar to the material transaction that I just created, but the labor transaction looks a lot like a timesheet. So your employees can go in and say, you know, what order did they actually work on? They can say which operation they actually worked on. So this is one option, would be to enter these time ticket type of labor transactions. Another option would be to backflush, just like with the materials. If it takes 1 hour of labor time on operation 5, let's just backflush that hour and avoid having anyone go in to enter it. Or just like with the materials, you could also have the Savant tool capture the clock in and clock out at the work centers to feed that back to the ERP. So I did create a labor transaction in the final operation. So when I go back on my production order, what that means is we're going to see that the event history has captured all of those transactions. We see all of the materials, the labor, and the associated journal entries being captured against this production order. We also see over in the totals that we are starting to capture our actual costs from the transactions that we've been generating. And the final piece to discuss would be a discussion around move transactions, at least for this order. So move transactions would be the way you can say you're moving from one operation to the next. Maybe we've completed the setup operation, so we're ready to move on to assembly. You can create move operations to indicate you have completed one and you're moving on to the next. If I complete a move transaction for my final operation, that will close out the order for me. These can also be performed from the likes of Savant's handheld scanning devices as well. So I have just created a move transaction for that last operation, which will close that order out. So at this point in time, my production order is completed, and that item that we were creating is now available in inventory to be sold, which means I could go back to my original sales order and ship that sales order out. Now, I do only have about 2 minutes or so left before I'm going to pass this over to Diane. So the last piece I would like to cover is a quick discussion around shop floor scheduling. I know that scheduling is a question that I get very often in my pre-sales role at Acumatica, so I want to quickly let everybody know that we do have advanced planning and scheduling available, or shop floor scheduling, within the manufacturing edition. We do support both finite and infinite capacity planning. So if you wanted to, or excuse me, we support infinite planning as well as finite capacity planning. So if you wanted to set up a finite work calendar against your work centers and be able to determine the capacity in each one of those work centers based on the time available and the other work being performed there, then we do have a few different screens to allow for that. One would be this rough cut planning screen. Acts a lot like a workbench where you can see all of the orders. You can modify your constraint dates and your dispatch priorities, which is what is the priority of this particular order. So, if I wanted to say this customer actually would like their order on Monday of next week, let's bump up that constraint date, and that will modify my start and end dates, which will allow me to accommodate for that order within my finite schedule. Now, this is, when you're at the rough cut planning, this would be your, what I'll call, exactly what it is actually, the planning screen. Once you physically schedule these orders, they end up on your firm production schedule. So you have, we can do currently finite capacity scheduling at the work center or machine level. We're also going to be able to take this down even to the employee skill level and the tool level. So once you have your firm finite schedule, it will look something like this, where you're going to be able to see each one of the orders, and you're also going to be able to see the timing that we are suggesting you spend on those orders based on what you have for available capacity and based on what the bill of materials is requiring for timing. Now, there is a lot to manufacturing. I didn't, like I mentioned, there's an estimating module here that I wasn't sure I'd get a chance to cover, and it looks like I unfortunately will not today. But I'd like, again, just to remind everybody that this was intended to be a very high level to show you what's capable, or what you're capable of in manufacturing edition of Acumatica, and then also to extend this over to the shop floor, warehouse management, which Savant and Diane are going to take you through next. So at this point in time, Diane, I'm going to make you the presenter, and whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and share your screen and begin your side of the presentation.
All right, thank you, Jessica. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen. I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes up front just doing a quick PowerPoint presentation, just like 3 slides, and just make sure everybody understands who Savant Software is and some of the things that we've been working on lately. We are a certified application, a validated application. We've also got team members that are, part of the developer network, and we've got a list here of some recent customers on the Acumatica side that some of you may know. and that list is growing every month. So that's, very nice on our side. We're getting a lot of experience with a lot of different customers on the Acumatica side of the world. Our software, as far as the handheld devices are concerned, we usually get a question about this. What kind of device works with your software? All kinds of options there. Zebra has quite a few options. Some are Android-based, some are Microsoft-based, although things are now moving very heavily, very strongly into the Android world. And it makes life a lot easier for training people on how to use the devices as well, because it kind of looks like your phone. So, it makes it a lot easier. So if you have any questions about that, either Chris Jackson or myself can help you understand what is an option for you. We've got a couple of testimonials here. We can provide some case studies and other things as needed if anybody wants to follow up and request that from us. And then we've got two different models. We've got either a cloud, sort of a SaaS model. It's a monthly price per user, or we've got an on-prem, just purchase the software kind of a price as well. And so there are different modules you can choose that handle various distribution options as well as manufacturing, and then also some other ancillary modules like advanced ship notices and other more advanced topics. So there are lots of choices when it comes to the Savant suite of products. All right, so I'm going to jump into the demo. Give me a moment. All right, so we should be seeing here this Acumatica screen. And I'm going to look at a couple of different things here. We have the manufacturing side pulled up here with production orders. I built several production orders, little different products than what Jessica had. But I think everybody can make the transition and understand what's going on. So this is one part of it. The second part is going to be with respect to, let me get this back here, yeah. With respect to the handheld device, which I'm going to be showing here with, I've got my Android device, and it'll be shown on my screen. So I will say right now that as I talk, I tend to move my hands, and sometimes this thing might turn to landscape mode accidentally because I've got it in my hand, but we'll try to keep that to a minimum. But anyway, we'll go and do some transactions on the handheld scanner. We'll come back to Acumatica and take a look at the results, as things are flowing. So first thing, we have several production orders. We'll go into, take a quick look here. We're going to be creating a finished goods, number FG 1001, and we want to make 50 of those. So if we go to our production detail, just to give you a lay of the land, we have 3 different operations, various work centers, where we're going to be using different component parts down here. So we've got components 1 and 2, and then in the second operation, we're going to use 3. And in the third operation, we'll do some packaging, which is the 4th component. So what happens here is once you release a production order, it then becomes available to be used out in the warehouse. If it's still in a planned status, we really don't want anybody touching it. We want to wait until you actually release it. So in that sense, it will just wait until that point before the warehouse can see what's going on. Once it is released, you'll be able to see it on the Savant side. We have a dashboard, web-based application to look at the orders that are coming through the system here, and you can see I've got my same, production orders here, where I've got number 10 and 11 that are ready to go. The paperwork's been printed, and we're ready to start making transactions against that. And you can also notice that I have this production order number 12 and it's in a planned state, and you can't see that on the Savant end. All right. So let's go ahead. There's two things that we need to worry about to start with. First one is we should have a printed traveler or pick ticket or something like that. And that can be printed automatically as soon as this is released. It can be printed from within Acumatica, or it can be printed from within Savant. There's some options that you have there. And then that paperwork should have a barcode on it that has the production number as well as the operations that are happening for that particular order. So once that's in place, the guys will want to go in the warehouse and pick the component parts, take them to the production line to be used. So from here, we've got our handheld device, and I'm just going to go find my picking option, and we'll get started. Okay, now it's asking me to log back in. That's because there's a timeout if you let it sit for too long, just similar to the Acumatica side. So we'll go ahead and go into our picking option. And now it wants us to scan the production order that we want to pick. So we're going to do number 10. Go ahead and scan that. And the system will then go through and calculate, where is my inventory in the warehouse, and what's available, what's ready to be picked based on various rules. But it will go find the oldest inventory that meets that criteria and ask you to go pick that. So it's asking us to go to location A03A, and we need component number 3. We need 50 of them. So we're going to go to that location, and we will scan that. And now it's asking for me to scan the item number to prove that I've got the right item. So we'll go ahead and scan component number 3. And now it's asking for a quantity. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my 50. And now it's moving on to the next item, asking me to go to a different location to get component number 1. So this will continue for all of the different components that are needed. I'm going to go ahead and get this second one here just to push the process through. So I want to go to get my right locations here, go to R3S1, and the item, component number 1. If I happen to scan the wrong item, which I just did, it will give us an error and want us to scan the right item. And then again, we need 50 of this. We don't necessarily have to get all of it. Let's go ahead and get the right thing here. So now we're picking that, and we've got the next item. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of here, and maybe I'll come back and pick the other components later. We have some customers that have large quantities, and maybe they need 10 pallets of something to do this production run, and they can only pull 4 pallets to the line at a time, and then they have to come back and do the rest. Perfectly fine, not a problem at all. You can pick partial and then come back and finish it, at a later time, and keep loading that line up. All right, so now we've got this order that's now in process. It's got some transactions that need to be pushed into Acumatica, and that's happening behind the scenes as we go. So I'll go back here. The other thing that we can do is go ahead and start the work order and start doing some actual work on that, where we want to maybe move it from one operation to the next. So maybe we're finished, with what we're doing in Work Center 10, and we want to move a certain number of pieces to the next work center, which we can certainly do by just going into the move function, scanning that order number, scanning what operation, and then saying how many pieces we completed. Let's just say we've completed 5. All right, so let's go ahead here. Hang on a second, whoops. All right, enter, there we go. So now it's completed those 5. And let's go take a look at what we've got here for results on the Acumatica side. So we'll go through back to the main production order. We'll refresh that screen, go to event history, and we can see that we've got those material transactions. It's created the batches automatically, and we've got our component number 3 as well as number 1 here. So these are just going to come in and start feeding this, excuse me, this production order, and it sets it to an in-process status, and it's moving on its way. So that's going to happen as frequently as you want it to. Now I just refreshed it again, and you can see here's my move transaction that's telling me that I completed those 5 units out of our first operation. So that's very much a real-time process. It happens as quickly as you want it to. Now, as a customer, you can control the timing of how you want this to update. It can be, within seconds, or you can say, don't bother telling Acumatica about it until 10 minutes have gone by. And they can just accumulate everything that's been going on for the last 10 minutes or maybe 30 minutes or whatever your timing is, and it can just push everything on that kind of a timed interval. That's really a decision, to be made by the end customer. All right, so this movement that we're doing to different work centers is great. You can do that for all of the different work centers except for the last one. So if I wanted to move this, and I've got these 5 pieces that are sitting in O20 ready to go, that's great. But what if I come in here and scan 10 and say I want to do 30? It's going to be unhappy with me and say that you can't do that because this is the last operation in the chain, and that means we have to do a receiving to actually get those products into inventory as finished goods. All of the other steps are just work in process. So we're going to go ahead and go back to the menu, and I wanted to do one other thing before we actually receive in our finished goods, and that other thing is to capture labor. Sometimes you want to configure the manufacturing to capture the labor that's been spent on these different operations as you're going through. So you can use the production labor option here for that. And again, we start by scanning the order number. Well, sorry about flipping my hand around there. Then we want the operation. So we'll do operation 10. Now it's going to come up here with some defaults. It can default your employee number based on your login, or you can come in here and override that with somebody else's employee number, depending on how you have the configuration set up on the Acumatica side. So it's telling me that my employee number, shift 1. Now I have an option here where I can enter the quantity completed, and I can enter a total time, or I can come in here and just hit the start button. So if I hit the start button, it's basically going to start the clock of telling me, okay, we're going now for this particular user. So that's one option. The other option is I can just put a manual number of minutes that were used in the production process. So let's go ahead and go back here, operation 10, and then completed quantity we'll say is 5, and we'll say, yeah, we took 15 minutes on that. Oops, 15. All right, so now it has recorded that as labor. And what that does on the Acumatica side is it'll create another move transaction with labor attached to it to get those pushed through that work center or operation 10. I'm gonna go ahead, back out of there. So you can have as many different people as you'd like, clocking in, clocking out, that kind of thing, to the various production orders and their various operations. Okay, so it's going to take a minute for that to come through. Let's go ahead and move on to our process of doing the final finished goods receipt. So here, I'll go back and we'll do a receiving now. And so at the end of the production line, we've got our finished items coming off, and we're ready to receive those into inventory. So again, we need to note our production order number we want to receive against. We also have some options here to print some labels. So as the pallets or boxes are coming off the line, we can go ahead and label those. We can do like a license plate label. We can do an item label. It just depends on, we can do both. It just depends on what's needed. And we'll go ahead here and scan our finished goods item number. Which I'm looking for. Sorry, I'm waving my arm around. You can imagine I've got like a whole wall of barcodes on the wall here. So, all right, and then how many do we want to receive? Let's just go ahead and receive 5. And where do we want to put those? We could put them at the end of the production line if we've got a bin location specified. We can put them on the dock or wherever you want to for that purpose. So now those have been received, and I can go ahead and exit out of my PO. I could keep receiving more. It just depends on how you want to do this. You could receive everything all at once. You could receive partial. Really just depends on what you want to do. Okay, so here's our labor transaction that came through, and we can take a quick look at that. So it's telling us we've got our direct labor for 15 minutes. And then in a moment, we'll see our receipt of the finished good. So I hope that makes some sense. Here we go with our move transaction. And that's our finished good right there. And now we have additional inventory in stock. Now on the Savant side, you can go ahead and look at your inquiry. So if you wanted to look up where your inventory was in the warehouse, let's just go ahead and do that for this one. Oops, sorry, I'm covering up my screen. So I scanned FG 1001, and it's telling me where it is in the warehouse. And you can see this little guy here, this third one down for quantity 5, or actually it's one at the end with the highest license plate number. That's the one we just received. And now I can maybe move that and put it into the warehouse into an actual location. So let's go ahead and do that by doing a move pallet. I can scan my license plate, which in this case I don't have the barcodes for, so I'm just going to type it in. And then I can put it somewhere in the warehouse. So let's go ahead and put it into a storage location. And now it's moved to that location. If I go back now and do another product inquiry, I can now see that 5 units is now moved to S002A. So hopefully this gives you a sense of, guys with forklifts moving things around, putting them on shelves as they're doing their process in the warehouse. All right. So all of this will continue with as many different transactions as it takes to finish out that production order. The timing of things doesn't particularly matter. I mean, obviously, if you're doing it real time, you should be doing material transactions, at least some of them, before you try to do any moves to push through the process, and labor transactions as well. So, and then the last thing that should happen would be that your product will be received, and then that will close out. When you get the full quantity, it'll close out the production order. One other quick thing I wanted to mention, then we'll open this up for some questions, is that you can also do inventory adjustments. So sometimes you're going to have the situation where you need to do a scrap transaction. So you can come in and choose the item number that you want to do this with, and you can create, a scrap transaction from here on the product adjustment screen. So this is just something that can be done if you'd like. And we're actually right now in the process of creating an option where that can happen during the work center move and or the production labor transaction, if you wanted to create the scrap at that time and just do it all in one fell swoop.
Everybody enjoy your rest of your week.